Counselor Jim.
It is 6 o'clock on December 19th, 2022, and I will call this meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Would you please join me in the pledge? Okay, first up, we have our public service announcements. Turn it over to you, Ken.
So our first one is a long-range transportation plan that's put out by NEMCOG. This is the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. It's Envision 2050. It's embarking on an update to the North Middlesex Metropolitan Planning Organization's long-range regional transportation plan. This is an opportunity to help the future of transportation in our region. So you can go to nmcog.org/envision 2050 to give your input. And if you should require any assistance related to this survey, feel free to contact them at 978-454-8021 and contact Justin Howard at jhoward@nmcog.org. We also have a QR code, but I don't know, is that on the town website anywhere? Mm-hmm. It is? Okay. Our second public service announcement is the Lowell Regional Transit Authority is Try Transit for a month for the month of December. You ride for free, all LRTA buses and Roadrunner vehicles. The LRTA is trying to introduce public transportation to everyone in our community, so please try transit and leave the driving to them. Some of their public transportation benefits: you have convenient access to employment, hospitals, medical services, shopping destinations like malls, plazas, specialty stores, attractions, restaurants, museums, and parks. Less traffic congestion and reduced energy consumption, helps with economic development, a clean air environment. If you would like to check out the routes or see any information about this, you can go to the www.lrta.com for more information. And our last public service announcement is annual notice for the spring 2023 town meeting. The town of Chelmsford will convene its 2023 spring town meeting on Monday, April 24th. Articles to be included in the warrant must be submitted to the office of the town manager in this building at 50 Billerica Road prior to 4 p.m. on Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. Petitioned articles must carry signatures of at least 10 voters. If you need more information or need help, contact the town manager's office here at 978-250-5202.
Thank you, Ken. Next up, we have public input. Is there anyone who would like to speak during public input? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone here or in the Zoom room. So we will move on to committee vacancies.
So vacancies, as of the week of December 19th, we have one seat open. It's a 3-year unexpired term for the Arts and Technology Education Fund. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has one 3-year term. The CCA Advisory Committee has one 1-year term. Commissions on Disabilities is one 3-year term. The Community Action Program Committee has 4 1-year terms. Community Preservation Fund has one 3-year term. Conservation Committee has one unexpired 3-year term. Council on Aging has one unexpired 3-year term and 2 3-year terms. The Cultural Council is looking to fill one unexpired 3-year term. Holiday Decorating Committee has 2 1-year terms. Parade Committee, all applicants are welcome. Those are 1-year terms and they end each July 31st. Permanent Building Committee is a 1 3-year term. And the Recycling Committee is looking to fill one seat to a 1-year term. If you're interested in signing up for any of these committees or have any questions, reach out to the town manager's office. You can email tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov or call 978-5202.
Thank you, Ken. Next up, we have licenses. The first one is the common vigilar license for Euphoria Coffee. Do we have anybody here? You can come up to the podium. We just need your name and address for the record, please.
So my name is Ziyang Ling, and the address for the shop is 1416 Fletcher Street,
Okay.
Chelmsford.
Do you want to say anything about what you'd like to do?
We're opening a coffee shop located near, like, right next to the Zesty Pizza shop, and there's our floor plan. And right now, the health department still asks for us to draw like an engineer setup plan, including electrical, plumbing, and fire escape plan. So I just reached out to an engineer 2 weeks ago, and he said he can get it done by the end of December. So hopefully, we're turning everything to health department and apply for a building permit. We can begin our construction process. And also, health department is asking us to have 1,000 gallon of grease trap outdoor. And maybe I want to talk to you guys because when I do some research, some like fried chicken shops don't even need like that big of like a grease trap outside. So wondering if we can like reduce the size of the grease trap, or is that a possibility because we're only a coffee shop, and what we're doing is just preparing like sandwiches, like using the oven, not even frying anything. So I think maybe 1,000 gallon would be a waste for like that small of a size for a coffee shop. And I think that's the only concern we have for this project.
So I'll turn it over to questions from the board in a minute. I don't believe we have any authority whatsoever on grease traps or anything that the health department requires, so that's something you would have to work out directly with them and according to their policies.
Okay.
Is that correct, Paul?
Yes, that's correct, yeah. And
They're an independent entity, and we don't have any authority to change that.
Yeah, I understood from Health Director Rose that the Board of Health is open-minded to, hearing your request, and so I think, it's not a futile effort from what I understand.
Okay, because I negotiated with, I think, Mark Maciello,
yeah.
and he said it's a requirement, so I'm just double checking with you guys if
Right.
that's under the law or anything.
Right,
So, yeah.
that's their board.
So you said Sue Rose is
Right, yeah. So
receptive
Sue's
to
aware-
having a
Sue oversees
discussion?
Mark, and then,
Okay.
but Sue, so my sense is, at the next Board of Health meeting, they may be able to consider that request.
So are we recommending he go to the next Board of Health meeting?
Yeah. I believe
Which is,
Yes, he made a formal request.
it's a request, yeah.
and that meeting is,
I believe it's after the first of the year. I believe it's.
they meet on Mondays, so it would be either the 9th or the 3rd, or no, it wouldn't be the 2nd.
Right,
So probably the 9th.
probably the 9th, yeah.
You,
I
you
think
can-
that day works for me.
Well,
Yeah,
you
check with
you
the
need to
Board of
work
Health.
with them and
I
make
have
sure
to
that you're
work-
on their agenda, or they're not going to be able to talk about it at their meeting.
So I have to talk to Mark and then put me on the meeting list?
Yeah,
or
contact the Board of Health office, and,
Board of Health office?
yeah,
Okay.
they can do.
Just request you're on their agenda for the next meeting.
All right. Do you guys have any questions for?
That's where we're
for
going
Rockets?
next.
All right.
Does the board have any questions?
It's up to them. It's up to the Board of Health, right? I mean,
What attracted you to Chelmsford?
So, because Chelmsford is near Lowell, and we have like a partner. He owns a coffee shop in Woburn, and he ran his business for like almost 30 years. So he know all different kind of techniques of how to make coffee, including espresso drinks and pour over like the handmade coffee and the regular stuff. So he's very experienced, and he lived in Massachusetts for 30 years, and he suggested Chelmsford is a good town to establish our business. So I think it's a good foundation here. So for our first shop to grow, because in the future we want to open like chain stores across Massachusetts first. So that's our goal.
good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Take a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the common vidular license for Euphoria Coffee, Inc. to be operated at 14-16 Fletcher Street, Unit A.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You're
Can't
welcome.
wait.
All right. Take care.
Love coffee.
Okay, next up, we have the one-day all-alcoholic beverages license for St. John's Church. Is there anyone here for that? Okay, if not, I'll just see if the board has any questions that need to be answered.
Are we dismissed?
Yes,
You
yeah,
are.
you're all set.
Yep, you're all set.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Is this an annual event?
Yep.
Okay, if there's no discussion, I'll take a motion.
So I'll make a motion to approve the one-day all alcohol beverage license to St. John's Evangelist Church, 150 Middlesex Street, for 12/25/2022.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0. Next up, we have the November 23rd incident at Center Brick House Pizza. I see Mr. Mickles here. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Charlie Mickle, Center Brick House Pizza, 1 Central Square, Chelmsford. I did watch the
Okay.
last meeting, so I'm aware. And we met with both fire and police, and I know there's, a bunch of questions. And first, we'll start off with, we take full responsibility. And in terms of wanting to have, because there were questions in the last meeting about the tent and why the tent wasn't used. And that was, honestly, that was on me. I was going away, and I didn't get back till that night. And I just said to my partner, Mike, we just don't want to do the party. It's a lot. It's a lot to do it. It's a lot to put it on. The last couple of years, we actually have had the tent there. I know in the last meeting that said it was, we had the tent out in the front parking lot. And we had people, there, but it was obviously different with COVID. And, looking back, it's easy to say, you should anticipate this big crowd. And we didn't think it would get to that point. And when I reached out to Mike, when I got back with my family, he's like, yep, it's getting crazy down there. And I came down. And by that time, the fire alarm was pulled. And I was across the street and saw it, and then saw the police and fire coming. So, and I read through the reports, and I read through everything, and we've, put some corrective things, hopefully, in place. We have, and I appreciate meeting with both, the fire and police. And, we have a meeting coming up, and, I get it, not that we can say we're not going to do the party, but, we're going to have the fire and police there for next year. We'll have the tent. And some of the reasons for not having the tent, just so you guys, it has become a little different. It has been a big thing. It's a really nice thing, I think, for the town, too. Kids come back, they have a place to go that's local. They're not driving all over the place, and they could be in the center of town. But, we do have new residents in the back, and we're fully aware of that. So to have a big thing in the back there, it is, people are looking forward to it, but also, it's not the greatest thing, and I get it. I know a lot of the people back there. And, to have a night like that, quite frankly, I know Mike and I, we're getting older too. We're up in the next morning because we have that tradition of getting breakfast ready for everyone the next morning. And now that cuts into us for our Thanksgiving too. So that's kind of the background of why we weren't looking to do it. Shame on us that we didn't think it's going to be something again because COVID is over. So that's kind of the background, because I know it came up, why we didn't do the tent, so.
So before we take any questions from the board, I just want to, I see Chief Ryan's here also. Chief Spinney reached out to me, and it's my understanding that when you were here last time, you were asking for a provision in the license to have police and fire detail on the night before Thanksgiving, and you would like to rescind that request and just work it out as it makes sense with the Brick House. Is that correct?
This is a question for Chief.
This is a question for
Because
Chief.
Chief Spinney brought this up, so, well, yes.
I just wanted to
Board
clear that before we ask Mr. Meckel questions.
So, good evening, board members, town manager. Yes, that is correct. So I did have a conversation with Chief Spinney prior to this. I think we had good, open, frank discussions with Mr. Mickle and with Mike back there, Mr. Brown, and I think we came to an agreement. Quite frankly, it's been overdue for these conversations. I mean, outside of the details, I think they have underutilized their staff, and we've looked at some training opportunities for our staff. We're going to be involved with that. So I think there are opportunities for Brick House to move this event forward. So yes, we will resend that.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board or comments?
I mean, I understand what, as you said, Charlie, you read the report and you watched our meeting from last week, last 2 weeks ago. And you had mentioned, Virginia, that we have several options that we could follow for this. I appreciate everything that Brick House does for the community, and you yourself, I mean, you and your wife are friends of the community. I mean, I quite frankly, I do think that we need to have a formal hearing on this, so that there is something in the record about how we discussed it and how we decided to move forward on this. I think just to set a precedent for others, because, from what I've read, this was pretty egregious, to have, 3 times the
Well,
capacity.
then I'll speak to that, because just so you guys, I'm sure none of you were there. And so the numbers that were thrown out there were not in Brick House, and so just to also get that out there. If we're gonna, and I'm fine going down the road of anything, and I'll take responsibility, but the numbers the 200 to 300 number was not what was in Brick House, just to kind of, because that's what's getting thrown out there.
But they were being served.
No,
Well, what I see on the report is that people
Yes.
were outside with alcohol, so I'm assuming they brought
we
it
had
inside.
a deck area, and then there were people that came that were waiting to get in to that deck area. We weren't serving. We decided not to. And in the past, we actually had, when we had tent in that area to serve, actually have a station out there. We decided not to and have everything inside. And again, I'm just saying, the numbers of, 200, 250, 300 weren't out there. We are totally wrong, but, I'm just, want to get that on record too. And I've discussed that with fire and chief and police.
And just, only because of the experience I have with my own kids, there's probably 4 establishments in Lowell and in Chelmsford that the kids come home from Thanksgiving to go to.
Yeah.
Those get shut down, and all the kids say, after that, let's go to the Brick. And they leave, and they show up on Charlie's doorstep in whatever condition they're in. And so then they pile at his front door to get in, because he's open later, and he's here in town, and you've got to deal with what shows up.
I don't know much more we can have. I think this hearing is, it's all on record.
But this isn't a hearing. This isn't
Whatever
officially
this
a hearing.
discussion, it's on tape. If there's any other questions that we would bring up in the hearing, why don't you ask them now? So, I mean, why put them through it? He's here, they're taking responsibility for it, they've been fined. I don't know.
Can I ask Pat a question? So, out of inexperience, what's the process for hearing what happens?
Well, we'd have to give notice and allow them, if they wanted to bring counsel or whatever, and we could also, and we would ask people to come here. I'd like to hear from, the other police officers that were there and the other firefighters that were there to get their perspective of what happened, perhaps even some of your staff. Some of the things, like I said, that we see in a report are very, very uncomplimentary to how that night went down, quite frankly.
Yeah. And again, that's why we wanted to meet with both fire and police.
Right. And if we decide to have any discipline, we would have to do it that way. I'm not saying that we should, because if we're going to have a hearing, then you don't want to make a decision before you hear all the testimony from everybody that would come to talk to us about it. But I just think, as I said, if somebody looking at that report, both those reports, and then if something similar would have happened at a different location, and they say, well, the Board of Selectmen didn't do anything about it, so we're going to be okay. I think just to kind of set some kind of expectation.
Quick question also, because I'm inexperienced in this. This was a violation of your license, correct?
Yes.
So it doesn't matter whether they were inside or outside, it's still a violation, right? So is that really the basis why you think we should do the hearing?
I think because of
I'm just trying to understand, Pat.
I'm just, because of what's written in these reports, I think if it's true that there were not 300 people there, then we need to know that, because that makes it a totally different, depending on what the number might be.
Well, I think what I heard is that there weren't 300 people inside it, but there were probably 250 to 300 between inside and on the premises, outside.
And similar to what Ken said, not another establishment had a party, they all let out, they all came to our parking lot, and all trying to get in. And that did happen.
And how many people were inside? Did it exceed the 94? If Chief says yes. It was 94 in the
Yes,
license, right?
yes.
So, Mark, I'm not an attorney, but my
not either.
my understanding
I'm not
is
either.
that if the board were to proceed with a hearing, it would be on the basis of a license violation, and the violation was the capacity.
Right.
Well, I think
The
there were
other-
other violations.
Excuse me?
I think there were other violations, if this report is correct.
Of the license, or just violations?
Violation
That were
of the
handled
law.
elsewhere? Right,
Yeah.
but that's different than violations of the license.
Okay.
So the violations of the law relative to fire code, for example, are being handled by the fire department, correct? So that's not something that, I don't.
Yeah, police would handle
I-
any.
Right, I don't know that we have any authority to have a hearing about that, or we'd have to ask counsel.
I
But,
think we
but
do.
Yeah, that's why.
The legal, the Mass General Law that was in our packet last time and is in our packet this evening is with respect to the license compliance. And the violation of the license was the population capacity.
Right. Thank you. That's why I asked.
Right, and so I'll just repeat what I said last time. My understanding from council is that, we have options to do nothing. We have options to have this discussion and understand corrective actions. I don't know why there couldn't be something into the record from this, or if we wanted to take disciplinary action, which is, I think, basically suspending or revoking or modifying the license, that would be done through a hearing. Does that
Yeah, that's
jive
correct.
with your
That's
understanding,
correct.
Paul?
Yes.
In my layman's understanding.
I would have thought
So-
that,
so I-
excuse me.
Go ahead.
No, I would have thought if that were the case, that either chief, the fire chief or the police chief would have suggested something like that, if they weren't satisfied with what they heard and after hearing the story from everybody. All we're getting is second, third-hand information, and how many times have you been in a place when people come out and they got a package on coming from, and they're just coming into the parking lot, and they're drunk from someplace else, or they got a can of beer in their hand, and that's something that can't be controlled.
Well, I get all that. I get all of this. The only part that I'm really struggling with, from my perspective, and I didn't know whether to bring it up if we wanted to do a hearing or, whatever, but why not pick up the phone as soon as it started to get a little bit out of control? The manager on site, I understand you weren't there until
And that's what we
things
went
went
over
south.
with
But
both.
the manager on site, to me, we're very fortunate in this town to have police and fire that will work with anybody. That's what I have always found. And I just don't understand why they didn't just pick up the phone and say, look, this is getting out of control, and get them down there earlier rather than later, because, like Ken said, you can't really control when the cars start flying in and it starts to get overwhelming. But that's the part that I'm struggling with, why that wasn't done.
And that's some of what, with fire and police, we put together corrective.
Yeah.
And having meetings with them. Absolutely.
Could you speak to some of the corrective action
Yeah.
planning that you've
Yep,
done?
so in terms of, we have a crowd manager, and now we're requiring our bar manager and staff to also take that crowd manager course. We're implementing also our bar backs to have, before they can work, they have to take that class as well. And it just came up, in the meetings, we have bar backs, but we also have other staff on the kitchen side that can, if it gets to the point that we're at 75%, those bar backs become at the door. And from there, we also have people inside that can then help, if it's, with the dishes, help the tables, help the other stuff. So they're shifting that around. That's part of the corrective action on that end of things. And then letting people know, don't hesitate to call fire or police if you need it. They're here to help us. And that was also part of it. And I'm sure you guys understand, that night is a big night, and to let the fire know whenever, yeah, that's the plan. And whenever we're gonna have a big event, so the other events, aren't really night times. The 3rd of July, when we have it, we have to have them there, and to inform them if we're ever gonna have, or if we ever anticipate, having some. Well, I mean, and I heard it in the meeting, the New Year's Eve just isn't a big night for us there, and, usually the winter is a little bit slower anyways. But if we're gonna have, those big nights, whether, it's the nice night that, the deck's available and it's a Friday night, to, hey, pick up the phone, kind of give them some advance notice to when we're gonna have it.
So Pat, when you say that you would like to have a hearing, is it a hearing to determine whether we suspend or revoke the license? Because that's really what it would be.
Or modify.
I think that would be it, to get more testimony, I guess you could say, from others.
Whom?
From the other police that were on scene, or the firefighters that were on scene, and even Charlie's staff. That,
I'm sure that the police chief has discussed it very diligently with the officers that were there.
I'm sure he has, but we haven't heard that, and
Well,
Paul, were you going to say something?
And I'm not automatically saying we need to take any disciplinary action. I just think because of the attention that this has gotten, we can't just let it go. We can't say, okay, we believe everything that the owners are gonna do going forward. I think we need to have it be more formally discussed.
Well, if that plan
Researched.
were submitted to us and it became part of the formal record,
Right.
would that be? Because I'd kind of like to see the plan, too.
So,
So,
we forwarded to fire, because it's more a fire issue than the police issue. I think on the police side,
Well, it's a bit of a license issue here, so from our perspective.
yes,
so-
yes, but I'm saying in terms of the plan, I've only been back and forth with fire
Okay.
in terms of the plan, which you can certainly, I was email back and forth with them to make sure they liked our plan, and they added a few things, and we're implementing that into our plan. So, yeah, I can easily, draw up, take it out of that email and get it over to the select board as well.
I don't know what everybody thinks, but that's, I
I'm,
think we should be aware of more than just the verbal.
yeah, I mean, I'm supportive of trying to document and getting some written input also from you. I think, Pat, to do what you're suggesting, personally, I'd like to get some input from council, and I don't know if it would make sense to have him come to our next meeting, because our license is with the establishment, and there's an individual name on the license. I don't know that we have the authority to demand that their employees come and talk to us and parade in front of us. And part of me wonders, is that, to what end do we do that? Because it's really, Charlie and his management that we're holding accountable. And it's up to him to hold his employees accountable for whatever changes need to be made, or to have the proper training and education and resources there. So I'm thinking out loud, but I'm struggling with that in my head. Like, I don't know that I would support bringing all of his employees in here and having
Well, I'm
us
not saying
talk
all
to
of
them.
them.
Well,
I
that's
mean-
what you said. You want to bring the employees in here.
Well, we don't
But the
have-
license is with the leadership and the ownership of the organization. So I don't even know if we can say that you need to bring your employees in.
I wouldn't require it, and as.
You want to require it?
No, I said I wouldn't.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't think we would have the authority to, force them to come in. But you've even said that basically neither one of you were there, you or Mike were there
No,
when it started.
I got back as the fire and police were getting there.
Okay, I
That's when
mean,
I get back.
right.
Mike was there.
Oh, okay, all right. So,
So the question is, do we need you're asking for a formal hearing to determine whether there is discipline to be had, or is what you're asking for something that can be accomplished without a hearing? That's what, I'm just trying to get clarity.
I guess I don't see the harm in having a hearing. As I said, because if this were to happen somewhere else, what are we going to say? Oh, as long as you come in and you talk it to us and you tell us you're going to do all these good things, that everything's going to be okay. And I don't think that's always going to be the case. And I think there are still some more information that we should have about this. I mean, it's not just the excess capacity. I mean, it did indicate in the report that they were serving intoxicated patrons. I mean, that's 2.06. It mentions that in our regulations. So I guess I don't see any harm in it. That's all. I mean, I think it protects them, too. Quite frankly, if we were to have a hearing and then see what...
Say more.
Well, I don't know. I mean, because I'm not going to go into a lot of detail.
No, you think it protects them,
Because then they will know what was discussed, and we either would issue some disciplinary action or not. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to prejudge what a hearing would say or what a hearing would result in.
My thoughts on the whole thing are, what's our job up here? To protect the town and our citizenship. And, this has obviously made headlines. A lot of people know about it. And do we, by not having a hearing, open ourselves up to any liability? Or at least not having an action plan, minimum? Because if it happens again and it goes further, when you read the police report, I agree with Pat, this sounds like it was almost, a powder keg, and you could add multiple ambulances there. When I talked to the chief, the comment was, they were like literally minutes away from calling mutual aid and having Lowell police show up. That's a little bit more than just, too many people in a parking lot, but I think we do minimum need an action plan. And I'm not sure whether having a hearing or not absolves us of any future liability if this happens again, either at this location or another location. But so I'm not sure where I sit on the hearing, but I definitely think there has to be an action plan provided minimum in order to remove us from future liability that we didn't do anything.
Mark?
Yeah, I think we should get advice on that.
And when I say us, I mean town, not me, but the towns.
Well, yeah, we're kind of acting for
I know.
them, so, I think we should get some advice on it at least. I agree.
You can't I don't think we can make a formal decision on disciplinary or not disciplinary without the hearing.
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even going that far. I was just trying to understand the plan in a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
Because I'd have more questions to ask, but I don't want to go into it if we're going to go
If you're gonna,
in this other route, if we're going to go down.
I mean, I'm
This
fine
hearing
if they
path.
submit us an action plan of the steps they're going to take, as you had mentioned.
I'd like to see that
but
as a start.
if you do want to have the hearing discussion, I think it would be beneficial if we said what our other questions are now, so that
I'd
at
be
least
happy to.
you can prepare if you don't know the answers.
I mean, just a simple question. Did any of your staff approach Mike, I guess, who was there? Did anybody approach them asking for them to call the police? And did it get denied? Did you just not act on it?
No one from the staff asked us to call the police.
So nobody under your
So
employ that were there?
The reason everyone came was a patron pulled the fire alarm. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that. but-
No, I know that, but you were way over capacity.
Yep.
There were obviously, I don't even know, it's difficult to even say if you were serving intoxicated people, but there were certainly intoxicated people there. Did anybody on staff get concerned about the amount of people that were there, plus the fact that they were intoxicated, and approach Mike and say, hey, do you think we need to call the police on this to get some help? That's my question, not why they came or... Just a simple
And why did the
question.
patron pull the fire alarm? Did they feel it was
Yeah.
too crowded, couldn't get out, or was it a joke? You know, it's questions like that that I'm kind of wondering.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why would somebody pull a fire alarm?
And why did it not sound inside?
Yeah. And-
Yeah, 'cause I heard it was
We've had
silenced.
tested since then, too. But yes,
I mean, is it not tested on a regular basis?
it
to-
is.
So if the board wants to just formalize the hearing process, if we feel we need advice from council first,
I do.
that would happen on January 9th. And I believe it's like a 2-week notice period, right, Paul?
Yes.
Our next meeting is 2 weeks from then, at the 23rd, and then we have the budget review on the 30th. So, and then we have our next meeting after that is February 13th. So we would have council here on the 9th ideally, and then get guidance what has to happen, and then pick a date. It looks like it would either be, is January 30th exclusively the budget?
No, it need not be.
I mean, I think trying to get this resolved sooner rather than later is probably
agree.
the better.
Would it-
Charlie, are you available on the 30th if we're able to do it then?
I'm just looking, that's a
I don't
Monday.
think we'll have time to get enough notice for the 23rd, so it would be the 30th or February 13th.
I mean, we'll have to meet and see if we can both be here. Which days?
It would be either January 30th or February 13th. And there's time, I mean, you can let Paul's office know before our next meeting. We'll have council here on the 9th.
Unless you wanted to choose a different date.
Or we could pick a
time.
different, yeah, we could pick
Time
not a
for-
Monday.
Right, yeah, I mean, you know, you could have.
That we could do too, if we just want some time dedicated to this.
Right, you could, a meeting just for that. If the board were to go to a formal hearing, you could choose a date and time. It could be afternoon, evening, whatever. I mean, it would just be you could do a meeting just for that purpose.
Let's try to make it when we meet.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I don't think it's a big deal. I just think it is
Just-
probably
just
something
to
that
kinda
needs to be
close
done.
it
Formally
out.
get everything on record, and, yeah,
Would you think it would be helpful if, in the meantime, Charlie submitted his
be
action
great.
plan?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
why not? I'd rather see that.
Because my feeling, well,
Yeah, preempt it, and with your, answer the questions that you would expect to hear, and your corrective action plan that you would expect to draft, and what you've already been working out with the chiefs.
And so, Paul, can we invite council here for the 9th?
Mhm.
And Charlie, I'd just also personally like to say, I mean, the feedback that we've gotten from both chiefs and from you this evening, I appreciate the responsibility and the accountability that you're assuming.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Okay.
We also have the matter of their license currently expires December 31st. So the board needs to make a decision. Do we extend it till December 31st of next year or some interim date? I don't know the downside of extending it for the year because there's nothing that says an action can't be taken if you're going to have the
Right,
hearing.
I'm fine with
Right.
extending.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I
fine.
know.
I'm fine
We
with
just
that.
wanted to have a conversation before we took care of that. So thank you again for coming tonight.
I mean, both owners are so cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I don't see that they're going to fix the problem and move on, so.
Right. So then, if there's no further discussion on the license itself, Paul, we can vote on the license tonight, correct?
Yes.
We'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the all alcohol liquor license for Brickhouse Center Sports Pizza.
To renew?
To renew the license.
Until December
Until December 2023,
December 31st.
December 31st, 2023.
Everybody get that? Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Did we get a second?
Oh, do we need a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Still do it.
Aye. Okay, so you're all set, and we'll coordinate on the date.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up, we have reports and presentations. And the first report is the status update from the Fire Station Study Committee. I'm going to turn the controls over to Ken. And I'm going to go to the podium.
I can't get past this thing.
Okay. So for the record, I'm Virginia Crocker Timmons. I am the Select Board representative to the Fire Station Study Committee and the elected presenter for this evening as well. So the committee wanted to meet with the Select Board. We've been in place for just about a year now, and we wanted to provide a formal status update and let you know where we are in the process and what we have planned going ahead. If you could go to the next slide. Just to introduce the committee, we have Chief Ryan, who's our fire chief in Chelmsford. We have two representatives from the Firefighters Union, Rob Albon and Greg Signini, who are both here. We have two resident representatives, Cheryl O'Donnell, who is also here this evening, and Bob Destrempe, who couldn't be here. And then Paul is the town manager, and as I said, I'm the select board representative. Rob and Greg have several years' experience as firefighters in Chelmsford. Cheryl is a state trooper in the fire marshal office with the state and has had a lot of experience doing fire inspections. And Bob is a resident of Chelmsford, but is also one of the deputy fire chiefs in Lowell, and has about just short of 30 years' experience in the field. At the bottom, at the right side of the slide, we were appointed in November of last year. We had our first organizational meeting in December, and we started off the year in January touring the 5 stations. And since then, we've had several meetings. We've probably easily surpassed 50 hours worth of meeting time in what is turned into some complex discussions on the trade space and things like that involving the fire stations and the optimal recommendations. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see the key elements of the methodology that the committee took on, and basically what I'm going to do this evening is step through those. So if you go to the next slide, the first thing that we did was to develop a mission statement. And so it was in 3 parts. The first was to assess what information we have available to us and look at the path forward and what needs to happen to meet the needs of a modern fire department and to meet the safety needs in town. The second part of the mission statement was to look at the needs of both the fire personnel and the firehouse structure. Again, looking toward what do we need to do in order to stand up as a modern fire department and meet the evolving needs of the community, including response times and safety. And then the third portion of the mission statement was in terms of formalizing the recommendations and looking at estimates for cost and timelines for those recommendations. So if you go to the next slide, we spent a fair amount of time, especially in the first couple months, just trying to get everybody smart and doing some education and research on our own. The first thing that we did was to tour the 5 stations in early January. There are pictures of the 5 stations there along with their ages and their addresses. Stations 1 and 2 being the most modern stations and being adequate for the community and the fire department's needs, and stations 3, 4, and 5 really being inadequate. And those inadequacies touch on several areas. One is just the sheer age of the buildings. The building lifespan is typically 50 years, and the 3 remaining fire stations are pushing 50 or are well over 50 years. There are issues in terms of code compliance, so if you were to just touch one building with a small renovation, my understanding is that that really opens you up to having to bring the entire building up to code, so you can't kind of piecemeal renovations and modifications. The sleeping and living quarters are insufficient both in terms of accommodating multiple genders and also in the number of firefighters. So stations 2, 4, and 5 house 2 firefighters, and when you start looking at safety standards and where we think we need to go in the future, you're probably looking at least 3 firefighters in a given station. And then there are things like the fitness areas, decontamination facilities. So when the firefighters come back from a structural fire, the only facilities that have working decontamination capability for the gear are stations 1 and 2. My understanding is there's one at Station 4, but it's not currently operational. And then when we looked at Station 5, besides the structural and the code issues, the length of the driveway from the door to the street, the garage door to the street, is really too short to safely accelerate and get out into traffic. And the other issue with that particular station is the amount of buildable area. So even if you were to demolish the station, there's not enough buildable area to build something big enough to accommodate the current needs. If you go to the next slide, we then spent a lot of time on paper research and just understanding, getting everybody to a similar level in terms of what standards and other things exist. So I'm not going to read them all, but there's a number of standards listed on the left side of the chart that we reviewed. We also have members who are knowledgeable in Chapter 148 of Mass General Law, which is the Fire Prevention Code, and we took a very cursory look at municipal liability. Cheryl got some input from someone at the state and a white paper from what was then Kopelman and Page, and basically said if a community understands that there are issues and they don't take action, they could be found negligent. So we tried to get smart on some of those things along with the standards. And then we looked at firefighters and what do they do. And in addition to firefighting scenarios and what does fighting a structural fire look like, we came up to speed more on what do firefighters do in terms of both line operations and staff operations. And one thing I think that's been important in our discussions is as the number of fire calls if those go down, our number of calls overall are increasing. And many of those calls, for example, are medical calls. Our firefighters are licensed EMTs, some of them are paramedics. Our apparatus qualify as Class 5 non-transporting ambulances. So if a firefighter is on a medical call, they can basically function with the equipment, medications, and skill sets that an ambulance could. The only thing they can't do is transport the person or the victim. So that's a big part of it, motor vehicle accidents, and you can see some of the other things there. Then we also looked at past studies in Chelmsford that were done that go back as early as 1989 and more recently up to 2017 and 2019. And what we found is that over the years, the standards haven't really changed, and some of the issues raised haven't changed. I'm going to speak to this in a little bit, but we're currently updating the studies that were done by Criterion, and we plan to update the one from IAFF, and I will talk to that in a minute in a couple slides. And then we looked at, Chief did a nice job of bringing in a lot of historical data from Chelmsford. We looked at comparable communities, and then we looked at other relevant community information. And the example there is given actually in Washington State. There was a case where 2 firefighters arrived on scene. There was someone trapped behind a door. The standards say you need 2 in and 2 out, but in the case where a life needed to be saved, they went ahead and went in to save that life. And even though that may be acceptable under the standards, the community was still fined several thousands of dollars by OSHA. So as relevant things like that come along, we're also looking at those. On the next slide, this is the approach that we're taking in terms of the analysis and the study. So at the bottom in the yellow, one of the first things we did after our education phase was to say, what are the critical success factors that we need to consider and that need to fall in place in order to meet the mission statement and the charge given to this committee? And I'll talk specifically what those are in a minute. And then what we did was for each of those critical success factors, we looked at what's the current state. What do we have today? And the next step that we took was up at the top of the chart in the dark blue. We said, what is the ideal future state that we'd like to be in? And recognizing that that's probably not realistic, we then started to identify what would be a reasonable compromise future state, or multiple candidates in terms of a compromise. And so we're still looking at that light blue bar, and I'll talk a little bit more about where we are with that, as well as with the actions to fill the gap between the current state and the desired future state. The next slide is the critical success factors that we identified. The first is the station conditions. So are the conditions adequate for both the firefighters and the apparatus needs? What are the number of stations that we would ideally need? What's the feasibility between renovate and repair versus rebuild? Those types of things. The second critical success factor was staffing and firefighter safety. And that takes into account how many firefighters you would want on an apparatus for safety considerations. Also, how many firefighters per shift, and what's the span of control of the officers on any given shift or at any given station. The third success factor is the apparatus. What do we have? How is it used? What do we need in the future, or what could, for a given scenario, how could we employ our apparatus in the future? And this includes, today we have 5 engines, we have 1 ladder, and then we also have other apparatus assets in the community, rescue, boat, staff vehicles, things like that. So we kind of took inventory of what do we have. And then the response times and the public safety. So this is looking at, based on where the stations are located, what do the existing heat maps look like for the community, and then what would the response times look like in terms of the gradients and the time to get to any given location in town. And that's, we're also trying with that to look at the firefighter first and second due, and a better way of saying that is probably the engine company first and second due. So that's, when does the first engine get there and how many people are on it, and when does the second get there, and what does that do for you in terms of response times. And then the last critical success factor was the pragmatics of funding, and looking at different colors of money, whether it's operational, capital, or external. So if you go to the next slide, we identified at least 7 different scenarios involving 3, 4, or 5 stations. And we did kind of a cursory look at each scenario as it mapped against our 5 critical success factors. On that cursory look, our educated hypothesis was that the 4 and the 5 station scenarios are probably less desirable than having a 3-station scenario. And what we're doing right now is we're taking a deeper dive into that 3-station scenario, looking at where a 3rd station would be located, what the response times are, and we're also including those 4 and 5 station scenarios in the response time analyses so that we have the data in the event that our hypothesis is not correct, if that makes sense. I've got a comment at the bottom of the slide that completing that response time analysis from 2 sources is really critical to us finalizing our recommendations. And where that's coming from is, if you recall, we've had reports in the past from Criterion, and we're updating that today. We felt that it would be good to have input from both Criterion and the IAFF studies so that we can make sure that they jive and that we're getting valid data, or that our assumptions are valid. We've had a lot of iterations with Criterion so far, and what we've done is the IAFF GIS studies were in the queue. And so we're number 2 in the queue right now, so we're hoping that within the next month they will get to Chelmsford and perform the study, and we're giving them the same scenarios that we've provided to Criterion so that we'll get the same data. The other difference, is my understanding, is Criterion has been responding to what we ask them to model, and the IAFF will also do that, and they may have some capability to also model against the standards and possibly give us some insight there. So we really want to get the input from both sources to make sure that we validated it before we finalize a recommendation. And then if you go on the next slide, that's the first of our next step in our remaining tasks. And then when we have that, we're also working on looking at the trade-offs between the number of apparatus for the preferred scenario or the top 2 preferred scenarios, how we would implement the staffing, and where the desired number of stations and station locations would be. And we've done some very high-level looks at schedule and timing, and some looks at, like, investment. We know how much a firefighter costs. We know how much it costs to maintain an apparatus. Chief's gotten numbers for us on dollars per square foot for buildings and things like that. So, but we're kind of rolling up our sleeves now as we're into the educated hypotheses and trying to finish that trade space. And anything to add from the committee or any questions?
No, good.
You want to say something, Chief?
Thank you, board members. Thank you for putting this together. I know as chair, she's done a great job. I just want to thank the committee. As the board chair said, that we've been doing this for over a year. So it's a lot of dedication of time. And as she said, the average meeting goes about 2 hours. So the manager, his time, certainly Virginia's time, my time, but also we got our union members. We have our reps from the town, Cheryl, and Deputy Chief Bob Destrom's not here today, but certainly want to thank him and all these members for taking their time to helping us put a good plan together. We still have more work to do, but I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. We're putting a lot of time, having some good, frank discussions, and certainly thankful for everybody's time and effort. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I'd also just like to acknowledge that Paul has been able to free up a few dollars for us as well to do some of these analyses and some of the, get some of the parameters that we need. So appreciate that.
So, so you mentioned that you're in the queue soon for the IAFF. So as far as the timeline, what does that mean? Does that mean you'll have probably something more concrete by the middle of next year?
I'm going to call a lifeline.
Okay.
Rob Albon, 1 Driftwood Drive. I'm also the president of Chelmsford Firefighters Local 1839, and I'm a representative on the committee. So as far as the IAFF study, a lot of departments nationwide and also in Canada, brothers up north, they rely on the IAFF to kind of give this all-encompassing survey. And the way they do it is it's actually science, backed data that they then take and they come up with a plan, not just GIS and response times and locations, but they kind of give you a concrete idea of this is what you're going to look like based on the information that we receive from whatever town you live in. So as far as Chelmsford is concerned, just a little quick backstory. So we're going to input all of our call volume, all of our data in regards to calls, staffing, firefighters, per apparatus, how many apparatus we operate, and what type of apparatus we use. They're going to take that information and use in combination with national standards, the science-backed data, and kind of come back with us and say, here's what you're looking at in regards to what we recommend. Now, like Virginia said, we can also say, based on the locations that we're trying to come up with as our proposal, does that match up with what you're recommending? So they can also do that. As far as timeline is concerned, like I said, it's very backed up. Mm-hmm. I believe at the beginning of this committee, we were probably 16th or 17th in line, and that was over a year ago. We're now number 2. So once we get word on when they're ready to go, we already have all of our information submitted. The committee has made additional recommendations to then send to the IFF for additional information. As far as timeline of when we're going to get it back, like Virginia said, hopefully by the end of January, we'll hear something back concrete as far as the study is concerned.
So it'll be complete then, or they'll start it then?
Hopefully it'll be complete by the end of January. So once we submit all the information, they tell us we're up. It's usually about a 25 to 30-day window. Okay. So we're hoping to hear back from them by the end of the year. And once that happens, we'll have something concrete to go on in January.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm also here for any other questions, too. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Looks good.
Okay, next up, we have the monthly traffic report.
Yeah, Madam Chair, DPW Director Christine Clancy's here to provide the monthly report of the Traffic Safety Committee.
Good evening. Under current items, the Chelmsford Police Department continues to conduct enforcement and speed studies throughout the town. That is ongoing, various locations throughout the town. That will continue. Under pending actions, this is the traffic improvements proposed at Golden Cove and Billricker Road. I know originally we were looking to potentially have that completed this past fall. We just received an email from Mass DOT last week that they're still trying to secure the equipment, some of the camera equipment from their vendor, Coastal Traffic. So right now the equipment's still not in stock. So my guess is that once that we receive it, it will be installed. Unlikely this winter, potentially weather permitting, but it's likely a spring project. And then the Chelmsford Center Brick House Rail Trail parking signage. That signage is being currently updated to clarify some of the parking areas just for the rail trail in that area around Brick House. So that is ongoing right now. I think we're just waiting for some of the signs to come in to finalize that. And there's no items right now under completed actions. I guess it's pretty minor updates for this month. I don't know if there's any other questions that the board has.
Is, George brought something up, I think, at one of our previous meetings. Is that something the traffic committee is looking at now? Was it Dalton Road?
Dalton Road, Stemmer Street,
Yeah.
and then the
I wouldn't expect to have an
Subway.
answer yet.
Subway Edge Extension.
Seneca, Subway Extension, Seneca, Subway,
Sylvan.
Sylvan.
Where the left turn
There's
is, yeah.
4 S's and 1, whatever. But they take a left and they go through there and to get onto Chelmsford Street so they get back onto Golden Cove. Instead of waiting from Stedman Street to cross Dalton Road and get down, it's usually, bumper to bumper, and it's a lot quicker to go make a left and then a right and get on Chelmsford Street and get back on Golden Cove. So.
Yes, I think as you're coming down Stedman, approaching Dalton, you would take a left past Miller's, well, what used to be Miller's, and any of those next 3 or 4 rights, putting up a no right turn between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., like they did.
It was 6, I think,
Sure.
yeah, but even,
Seven,
either
whatever
way,
it
it
is.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, on the main street, yeah.
Yeah.
We can look into that.
The left turns one, yeah.
Or we might have, I'm just getting back this week, but we'll have an update for next month on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, because what I was saying is they did it to some of the other streets on Stedman before you get to
Oh,
the
okay, right, yeah.
five-way intersection. There are no
That
lefts
way,
there.
it's just
Yeah.
like, it's just like a.
Yeah, and I sat, after you brought that up at the last meeting, I went down and sat there and saw all the cars zipping down there, and you're right.
And this, in the morning is the
Yeah.
concern, not the afternoon, just the morning.
Got it through and be coming the other way, but they're more sporadic,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. I think it's both times a day. And
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Christine's going to move on to the monthly opera project update.
So this spreadsheet has been updated as is monthly. So since last month, there hasn't been too many updates. I think the largest update is that we do have the Assistant Facilities Manager. He started last week. So really, the next step is really start implementing a lot of these projects, which you see more significant updates really.
Who is that?
It is Matt Schweizer. He's coming from more of the construction industry. He has over 20 years' experience. We're happy to have him on board, and he just started last week. We're just starting looking at all the schools and touring, and really just we're throwing him right into the projects, and it's really, I think, a great addition to the team. So that we should see more updates in the, especially in the next month or two with project implementation. This spreadsheet is updated, so in terms of this spreadsheet, a couple rows that I did add are rows 1B and 1A and 1B, just to clarify the spending of the mechanical support school HVAC. Before we had that all lumped into one amount, I broke out the assistant facilities manager position, and also the remaining amount that we really don't have identified. We could potentially use that for another ongoing HVAC contract for the schools. That does expire this coming June.
So the 85,000 and the 139 are subsets of the 506?
Correct. In previous months, they were shown, I think it was like seven, that added to seven something.
Is it additive, or is it the total 506? Or is it
No,
additive?
no, it's not a subset. That is added. So I broke it out as a separate item. We also have updated the column, the amount spent invoiced, just based on the latest invoices that we received. So this is updated as to what we have paid across all upper projects. I updated it, and also Darlene Lucier updated any non-DPW projects. So that is also shown. We still are anticipating the overruns that we've shown in previous months. We're not really changing that yet. The market's still unknown. As we also go further into procurement, we'll be able to refine some of these numbers. And I guess I do have a clarification. If you, the numbers 30, 31, and 33, those are some of the sewer updates. It just says in there that the reports will be, the final reports will be pending early December, in November. That really should say late December, early January. We're just trying to finalize that right now with Weston and Sampson. Those are largely the updates that we have. I mean, there's been movement in a lot of these projects, and it's more of a minimal level. We've had more site visits, more, we're working on the technical specifications for some of these projects. And then the next big step is to really start to write these IFBs so we can go out to bid with many of these projects this winter.
Can I ask a question about just the
Sure.
spreadsheet? Because I still have trouble,
Sure.
interpreting it, okay? So I certainly understand the budget. The amount encumbered, to me, when I think about encumbrance, it's more of a financial, from an accounting standpoint, not as much from a PO or a project standpoint. But maybe that is how you're using it. Because I keep looking and saying, we had a budget of this, how much have we committed to?
That's the encumbered amount.
And that is the
That's the
committed amount.
Contracted amount, yes.
Okay, so that, I should be reading that as the contracted amount?
Yes.
Okay, and then what the balance is, okay, so here you have it, what's invoiced, so whatever the delta is, which isn't on the sheet, would be the balance.
Correct.
So to us, that's what's still hanging out there. Because I think what keep looking at is, we kind of reserved $2 million someplace down the road. And it would be nice to see kind of what's hanging out there in a number.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So
Sure.
we've committed this. The actual is great, so we kind of know what's going on. But what the balance is, and then I guess the next piece for me would be, what are the total dollars that we haven't come to terms with yet? In other words, you don't have an encumbrance for it yet. There's no commitment yet. And then what that is, to try to figure out is, when do we start approaching the point where we can reassess what that 2 million really is? Is it something less than that? Is it becoming solid? And then is that something we can start to look at for future commitments?
Sure.
That's what I struggle with a little bit.
Sure. I guess just a couple of questions I have. So we do
Yeah.
have the column estimated escalation price adjustment. So if we anticipate an overrun or a significant underrun, or an underrun in any means, that's where we will start to flag it. So if we're under encumbered, I guess we're still hoping to, or planning on spending the entire encumbered amount. If it's zeroed out there, that's the current plan.
But if encumbrance means your commitment, right, contractual commitment, why would it then go up?
Well, it could, if there's a change order. So, or in the case of one, it could actually be less, because their billing, it depends on the terms of their billing. Some of these are lump sum, some of these are based on their hours, so they have to, I guess, it's like if the contract's a not to exceed,
Right.
then that contracted amount is what we've, at risk of up to that amount, but it could be
Right.
less.
No, I get that part, no problem. But if it can go higher, that would be one that I'd really want to understand.
Right, and that's
That the
where-
encumbrance is low, and that's not a good situation.
No, that, it could happen as once we get into project execution, but that's where we get into having contingencies. And so we're not there yet, because a lot of these projects are still in the early phases. But it could happen, but that's not our goal, is for that to happen. In terms of, for the next update for the amount encumbered but not spent, do you want to see it per a line or per a project, or is it something more, are you looking at the totality of the number?
I guess I'm kind of looking at both sides of it, you know?
Sure.
I'm trying to understand, you know, when are things starting to firm up? When are we starting to feel comfortable with some of the totals that we're seeing in the timing of when those things may get done? And again, then coming back to, what's that 2 million reserve looking like now? Is it really 1 million? Is it 1.5? You know, and, I mean, the other part is, again, looking at the timing. Like you said, if there is an opportunity for an overrun on these projects, when are we at the point where we're pretty comfortable there's not going to be a problem there? Or there is. This is still a potential that they get into something and they come back with a change order and say, hey, we've got to do this now, we didn't realize it. So those are the kinds of things that and I'm not trying to tell you where to put it, but those are the kinds of questions that I'm looking to get the information off this spreadsheet, so to speak.
Sure. And that's the current estimated escalation price adjustment column. That is, if we anticipate an overrun, underrun, that's what we can currently tell based on where projects sit. Once we advance some of the execution, I think we'll have more of these clarified.
Right, because I looked at that as, that was the kind of the inflation kicker.
Contingency.
That was thrown in there
Yeah.
over what the original budgeted numbers were. I didn't look at that as this could be an additional increase because of how the project progressed.
Sure.
So, could I ask, just so I understand the columns, just to finish this, you have your budget, you have your amount encumbered, you have your percent escalation, that's our inflation one. That next column, and I appreciate the fact that we have these columns in here now, because I think now we can understand a little bit more about what's going on inside the entire budget. But for instance, on line like 4, where it's a negative, so it says procured, so I'm going to assume that the job is now done?
I don't think procured
No.
means finished.
No,
That
that's
was
just
my
bid.
next
Contract
question.
signed.
I mean, it's been bid and.
It's committed.
So you're 14,000 under on the committed bid, but you still could have overages?
Well, here we likely won't, because if you look at the description, it says that center school pneumatics upgrades to be completed December break, so, I mean, that's happening in 2 weeks. I'm not anticipating any changes, but I guess until the project, I mean, I guess never say it wouldn't be, but we have all the equipment procured. And the project has gone very smoothly to date, so I think that $14,000, we put it in there because we're pretty confident the way that was a lump sum. We're very confident that we could subtract that from the column.
So when you complete a project, will we see another column that says completed?
We can, I guess we put the spreadsheet together, I know in terms of the goals for next December, because projects are going to continue next June. Projects will be procured by June, but they'll be continuing beyond that. We can track the percent complete too, if you want to do that as well.
Yeah, because I had.
Once you get to like 50% complete, you can sit there and say, well,
Yeah, we're pretty solid. You know,
I had
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had a similar, I think this is similar to Ken's question. So procured doesn't mean complete, but if I look at like line 9 for the rooftop exhaust fan units, it's procured and the project status column says completed rooftop exhaust fans. So is that job complete and it's 39,564 and we have the 13,500
Yes,
to
so
pull back down into the.
that one is, right. So some procured doesn't always necessarily mean complete, but in some cases, there are some procured aspects that are complete.
Okay.
So we we can add a column to show that this project, or I could even maybe highlight projects that that are
Yeah.
complete, just so that you see, we can say project complete. I only think, if we start adding like 4 more columns, so
Right.
we could highlight a percent complete, or we
Yeah,
could
and
do
honestly,
something.
some of these could even be hidden, because what we're trying to get to, you can kind of hear the questions.
No, I don't want to hide them
So
yet.
it's really not about micromanaging it's more about maybe you making some adjustments here so that information is coming forward.
Sure,
So-
we
so
can
we
do
can
that.
see it.
Yeah, and it does say, like, now that I'm going through, and when you get down to items like 23 and 26, you have complete and work completed, you have different kind of lines in there. So maybe if we just took all the ones that you have marked, complete, completed, work completed, project completed, and just give us a total of completed and a percentage of overall, that might give us an idea, like, how far through these we're getting, and, you know, how far, because you do have them marked, but just, they're not all marked with, you know, work completed, project completed, project, you know what I mean? So,
Sure. We can definitely do something, whether it be color coding or a total, we'll find a way
Yeah.
to clarify it.
this is very helpful, though, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Paul, I just had a question on the CCA line. So
Oh, yeah,
how far is that going to get us in terms of time?
We're, your next meeting on the 3rd, the 9th, Lexi Lattimore will be here, and we'll be providing an update in terms of where we stand, the plan for the future, and then what we anticipate with the town's monies, as well as, you know, the recent earmark we got as well, so.
Because I know when we first allocated that, there were, like, there seemed to be a trade space of things that we were spending monthly allocations toward services and
Right,
things that
okay.
I think Lexi was going to take a look at and say, could we adjust how we're doing that? So do we need to burn at that rate?
Right.
Basically.
And
So I guess that's what I'm wondering, is what do we have left
Right, and then
in
we'll-
terms of time?
We'll have
That'll be
that
in
at the next meeting on January 9th.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 8 is the discussion of legislative priorities. Is that where we are?
Yes.
Paul and I had talked about this when we were doing the draft agenda, and we're looking at inviting the legislators in on January 23rd, when NIMCOG comes to brief us, and we had talked about talking to them also about priorities or questions. So we thought maybe we should have a discussion this evening and then kind of refine it the first meeting in January before they get there, in terms of what do we want that discussion on the 23rd to look like. Have invitations gone out?
No, they'll be going out this week.
Okay. So for example, the NIMCOG study will be one thing, but then just to kind of get some ideas flowing, I'd like to understand what they need from us in terms of supporting their budget cycles, because we've been getting called when it's time to earmark things, but is there something we need to do earlier? So can they give us clarity there? Do we have priorities we'd like them to look at, you know, related to sewer, Chapter 70, Chapter 90? And I'll stop talking. We just wanted to get some ideas. Our thought was we could put a list together for the next meeting, and then we could just say, okay, well, and then we could, that way we'd also be able to give them a heads up.
Well, I think you just hit on
Yeah, those are
Chapter
the,
90 roads.
those are the kind of the big ones,
Oh,
yeah.
and unrestricted government aid also.
Yep.
That's not 90 or 70.
Right.
That's, I don't know if it has a number.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. I mean,
I got one.
you know, some things that I just wrote little notes to myself, you know, how, I think we need to talk to them about how that 4% surcharge is going to work, you know, if they have.
The
how that's-
millionaire's tax?
Yeah, yeah, you know,
I don't know how your money's getting spent.
yeah, where it's going to be spent, how it's going to be calculated, if it's going to be shared with the communities, or what's going to happen with
That's
that.
one of those things they don't know yet, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but we could give them our thoughts on what
Yep.
we think it should happen to it. And as far as the budget cycles, I mean, I think it's critical, too, that they get the budget done on time. You know, as you mentioned at a meeting the other day, Paul, you know, sometimes it goes to the end of July, right, before they get it, and then even then, they pretend it's still July, even though they're in the 3rd of August or something by the time they get it done. So, you know, I think that's critical, because otherwise, we're uncertain how much we're going to get and when we're going to get it. And then kind of a, not a major thing, but I think something that could be important to us, and the chief, the police chief has mentioned it a couple of times, is auxiliary police. The fact that we, that basically we don't have auxiliary police anymore, and I think it impacts us on details and things like that. And even at, like, parade and other events.
That's actually a great point.
And I don't understand why it was why they were eliminated, but I don't know what the reasoning for that was. Is it because of the new police standards?
Police reform, yeah.
Okay. So,
One of the issues, the big issue that I heard, especially we talked about a little bit at the tri-board, was the push on more housing, MBTA, whatever, affordable housing. But at the same time, we're constrained by sewer, water, and so we're getting these requirements pushed down, but we're not getting any kind of relief to deal with our, the fact that we are capped. We're capped on sewer. It can impact our water if we start going into, septics and other kind of treatment. So there just has to be an understanding of, what those issues are, and it can't just keep it getting pushed back down on all the towns, and I think that's a big issue.
Maybe we could ask them, or discuss mental health programs, because, I think we now have 3 homeless camps, and, you can build all the houses you want, and talking to some of the people that are in those camps, it's really not about finding a place to live or not. It's their mental health is what they need help with. I think that's the solution to that issue, and it's not more housing necessarily.
Only two of them are only gonna have to be there a couple of weeks, right? I mean, 2 of them are brand new, right, out of the 3, out of the reps, is that what you're talking
I
about?
thought you were talking about homeless camps.
So,
Yeah, I did too for a second.
Like, they've been here for a while.
I mean, when you
Yeah, I
invite the reps
switched.
in, and then you got a new administration who they don't even know each other, so, I mean, I think it's gonna be very difficult for them to.
But it's fertile ground. I mean, you plant these seeds.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense that you maybe you're giving them goals to find out for you to come back and answer. The only guy supposedly has a little experience, has experience, and is.
Jim Osero. Yeah.
Well, Senator Barrett does.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
dog
the
show.
legislature invitations will include the 3 House reps, the senator's office, and also Lori Trahan's office, because she was instrumental in pulling that letter together for NIMCOG to do the traffic issues. So I guess thinking about, is there anything more even on a federal level, or have we kind of hit things that would relate to her as well?
Yeah, it's still water and sewer.
The mental health and water,
Yeah,
sewer.
water, sewer, PFAS,
Where do you want to have the meeting for them?
We were going to have it as part of this
This room?
meeting.
So, but I'm just wondering how you would set it up. I wouldn't want to have them sitting in the audience.
No, we could set up
At the
tables
table.
like we,
Okay.
there's,
Yeah, we've done it
it would
before.
just, it would be no more than 5, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to
Probably
make
that.
sure we give them the,
And microphones.
yeah. Mike.
well, it's more the respect they.
Yes.
Probably the
They
chapter
can sit
70
here if they want.
calculations.
Yeah, we'll give them these seats when we
I'll
go
go
out there.
sit out there.
Chapter 70 calculations.
Mhm.
That would probably be one I'd want to see on there, too.
Yeah, I think that was on there.
Okay. So we'll put a list together, and then we'll look at it one more time on the 9th.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, Paul, town manager bid awards.
Yes, I've asked Christine Clancy to stay in seeking the board's approval regarding the solid waste and recycling collection bid awards. Christine's staff, solicited proposals, because our current contracts for solid waste collection and recycling collection expire at the end of the fiscal year, which is just over 6 months away. And we typically bid it, it's a 5-year contract, typically bid around this time of the year, because you need that lead time for transition if the event a new company were to come in. And as we've done in the past, we've sort of procured the whole spectrum. In other words, we asked for proposals from everything from manual recycling and solid waste collection, meaning without carts, to automated solid waste and recycling with carts, for yard waste, bulk items, and so forth, and then, also looked at their experience and what other communities they provide services for in Massachusetts and so forth. And at the end of the day, after a pre-bid hearing and, discussions and so forth and revisions to the procurement documents, we ended up with 3 proposals for the spectrum of services. One each from our current providers. Right now, we have Republic providing our solid waste collection, so they bid on the options from solid waste as well as recycling collection, manual, automated, and then similarly, Waste Management, which provides a recycling collection, bid on solid waste collection and recycling collection and yard waste and so forth, because obviously those companies are capable of doing it. It was just, when this was done 5 years ago, looking at the proposals, we awarded it to 2 separate companies. And then there were other companies who were participating in the process, and a third one, meaning E.L. Harvey and Sons, submitted a proposal as well for solid waste and recycling collection services in all scenarios. We had budgeted, as we discussed at the last tri-board meeting with the Finance Committee and School Committee, that we were anticipating our cost for solid waste and collection to go up about 30%, and that was based upon what we were seeing in the market, i.e. other communities that were bidding this service and what bids were coming back for. And at the end of the day, we were fortunate. We had 3 experienced, qualified contractors who could perform the work. And the request that we're bringing before you, as sort of summarized in the data that's displayed on the screen, is we're requesting the bid award to E.L. Harvey and Sons for traditional collection of solid waste and recycling materials for the 5-year period. And traditional meaning what we're currently, the manner in which we're doing it today, meaning no carts, unlimited recycling collection, the town's continued standard of 2 32-gallon barrels for solid waste collection. The modifications, which we think are enhancements to the service, would be recycling collection would now occur weekly throughout the community. So we would no longer have the blue weeks, the red weeks, and every other week of recycling collection. The proposal that was submitted by E.L. Harvey provides for a weekly recycling collection. And that's significant for 2 reasons. One is we think it will reduce our solid waste disposal, which we're paying $97 a ton to dispose and burn solid waste, therefore further encouraging recycling. And second of all, it also avoids the anxiety factor in which we get calls that if somebody misses or forgets to have their recycling collection, they've got a month's worth of recycling standing by, and we've had requests from people saying, well, why can't you do the recycling collection on a weekly basis? And the interesting thing to note is the cost isn't double, and we saw that from the bid results that were submitted. So the good news is under the proposal we're recommending continued weekly solid waste collection, now going to weekly recycling collection, as well as 5 scheduled leaf and yard waste collections during the course of the year. The only drawback, and we saw this from all the vendors, is the bulk item collection. And what we're proposing is to maintain the bulk item collection, but rather than being on a weekly basis, it would be on a monthly basis. Just in terms of the logistics of this, the other method to maintain weekly or on-call is very costly. And what we're seeing, and you're seeing it across the industry, the cost to recycle and collect bulk items, and you saw this with mattresses, you're seeing it with televisions, you're seeing it everywhere. These bulk items, sofas and so forth, would go to the monthly collection. And our experience has been in talking to, our staff who's involved with these calls and logistics, monthly shouldn't be too onerous on somebody. It's the typical resident isn't throwing out a bureau and or a living room sofa on a weekly basis, so that's how it would go. Bottom line, in terms of cost, we're spending just under $2 million right now to do solid waste and recycling collection combined. As you can see from the proposals, the recommended first-year cost under this contract with E.L. Harvey would be $2.3 million, and then the 75,000 for the recycling and, the curbside leaf and yard waste collection and disposal 5 times a year. That similar proposal from Republic was 3.3 million. So you're talking obviously a $1 million differential. And then when we did see the waste management proposals for automated, their bid prices mirrored those of Republic of over $3 million. So that's our recommendation this evening, would be to contract with E.L. Harvey and Sons for solid waste and recycling and, curbside leaf and yard waste collection, as well as the monthly bulk item collection, at a cost of $2.3 million plus $75,000 for the curbside leaf and waste collection. And as you can see, the contracts escalate by 4% per year, and that should get us to the 5 years. Now, to come back to the cart issue, we know and we see, and we've heard often desires from residents to have the carts that you see in Lowell, you see in Barica. If we were to go that way, that'd be an extra $1.7 million purchase on this. Yes, we could borrow that over a 10-year period, what have you, but the cost, because we have 13,000 single-family homes, and because, like everything else with the increased price of petroleum resins and everything else, that's the cost. And therefore, we're recommending that we maintain the current method we have, where anybody can get their own barrel, put the recycling sticker, and then have unlimited recycling collection. So that, I think, is a summary. I don't know if I missed anything, Christine, in terms of the summary? Okay, thank you. So that's what we're seeking. Obviously, this would give us 6 months to promote this to the residents in advance of the transition. They would come in with new, E.L. Harvey is ordering new trucks. They would bring in new trucks, to serve the town, because that was also part of the thing is, well, what are you going to have for equipment? Because the last thing that you're going to have is have your trucks break down. We already encumber issues in terms of the queues at the tipping facility in Haverhill, and so, which often amount to delays. And so by requesting all bidders, and they all submitted it, you're going to have modern equipment. They're not going to be out there with an 8-year-old, collection vehicle that's out there. And we think that positions us well in terms of solid waste and recycling collection. And then a year from now, when our Covanta contract comes up for disposal, we're in a consortium of other communities. We would obviously look to do that a year from now. But also the other advantage with Harvey is they have a transfer station at Devon's that may then provide another option in the future if they were a hauler as well, because that's also a very tight market in terms of where you can bring your solid waste and recycling. Your solid waste materials for disposal. So again, the recommended bid award is for E.L. Harvey and Sons as presented, which again is a first-year bid cost for solid waste and recycling collection of $2.3 million plus the curbside leaf and yard waste additional $75,000.
So I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One is, so it's going to be 5 days like it is now, the same
5 days, yes, yeah, the 5-day collection. We looked at everything. There is no benefit in terms of cost savings to the community of single-day collection where a company will bring out a whole fleet throughout the town. The other concern with that is if they miss something, then you have a struggle getting them back into the town, whereas if they miss, a street on a Tuesday, they can easily come back in on a Wednesday and collect, make up a collection or something was missed. But no, there was no cost savings by not going to single-day collection across the community.
And the other question is on the bulk item, is that going to be a specific week every month, or is it going to be, how will that work?
Yeah, Christine can speak to that, how it's going to be arranged, because we're trying not to be the middle person in this process.
Correct. We don't want to be the middle person, so we'll be up to E.L. Harvey to manage that. So it's up to the driver to manage that. That's all we have right now. It's not something that we'll be managing. That's how my understanding it's been done in other communities. It's the responsibility is placed on the contractor. So however they do it, they hopefully, I guess they know addresses.
So they'll decide what that monthly schedule is?
There
and
won't,
then you'll
sorry, there won't be a
communicate
monthly
it?
schedule. It's typically, it's you put out your item any week, but you're just allotted that once a month. So they won't decide that it's the third the third week. It will be any time, which is, I think, so there's flexibility within that month, but you are only allowed it once.
How are they going to track who puts out the
Okay.
one?
Right.
They have to track, they have to track
Because they're-
that if your house only put it out once that month. That's on their responsibility to track. But we're not saying that we're picking a day of the month and everyone put it out. It's any week, but only once for that month.
Yeah, I'd imagine if you pick the week, they'd be running to the tipping station.
You'd have
every
to get
day.
extra trucks or something.
Right, that's a good point, too.
So it probably benefits them to track it. I have a few questions.
Please, yeah, we'll let us answer.
As far as the leaf pickup, is that, how many, are you limited to the amount of bags per week, or?
There's no limit. I think the only thing that we do note in terms of our contract is that it is just for residential use. So if we show up and there's 500 bags and it's obviously from a landscaper, that might be Yale Harvey would potentially reject that and notify us, and we would work with notifying the resident of that. So it is for residential, for your yard only. Other than that, you're allowed to. We'll have to coordinate the details exactly, but I think it can be put in one of those bags, or potentially a barrel. But it does need to be. It's not like you just put a pile in front of your house. It will have to be bagged or barreled, and. Yeah, it will be 5 times. We have to coordinate those exact dates, looking likely to spring, maybe 1 summer, 2 fall.
And then, I'm going to assume that it's still 2 barrels per week for trash and unlimited for recycling, even if it's picked up weekly?
Yes. 64 gallons still is the limit, so 2 32-gallon barrels, and then unlimited recycling.
And then my last question, those auto pickup machines, like I have a couple neighbors who actually went out and bought, because they're a much bigger barrel, you wheel them out, they're easy to use, it's not like you're carrying a barrel out. And I think I've seen them pick up and pick those up with it. So can we make it known that if you voluntarily want to buy them, or can we have them for sale?
We talked about
that.
Because I'd buy them just because they're easier to use.
Yeah.
We can, so that's something we were thinking about, because right now, I know if you were to go to a local store, you might not be able to find them. So it's something we can work on, notifying people if they want to purchase it, but they're not required to purchase it.
So, and then, no more questions, but sort of comments. I mean, when I saw this as a resident, I was kind of excited. I'm happy with the fact that I'm going to get leaf pickup now, because otherwise I am, lugging them down to my mom's house in Concord and dumping them in the woods behind her house, which is torturous. So to me, that was great. And to get weekly recycling pickup, because we are avid recyclers, we'll wash everything out. We have people living in our house, we don't even have 1 barrel of trash a week. But my wife, on the weekends, every other week, makes me take it to the dumpsters here, because she doesn't like having that many barrels around. So,
Yeah, that's something else we'll mention.
Sure, so that's something else, is by having weekly recycling, we will see a lot less use of our recycling here, so potentially, we haven't said we're getting rid of it, but it's something potentially that we could eliminate, because that does have costs to us, and it's
And it's a
something for us
mess.
to look at. And it is.
Nobody follows the rules.
It's a mess, and also we think that we're getting a lot of non-residential
I've seen that.
recycling. Yes. So
I
I
saw
think
someone dumping their trash blew out, and I'm looking at the address and the envelopes going,
Yeah.
they don't even live here.
Yes, I think
They
you're
don't
gonna.
care.
Yeah, I think you're gonna. I would say you're 95% certain those containers are gonna go away
Yeah,
in the
it should.
building,
If it's once a week, I
because if it's weekly, there's no need for it if it's unlimited, because that was the problem before. Oh, I have all this stuff from the holidays. I don't want to hang on to
Yep.
it for 2 weeks. But what we're seeing, is
You end up with not only that, you get people that are dumping all kinds of hazardous screens and everything out there just to get
Right.
rid of them. And they put them between the 2 dumpsters to hide them.
exactly. And then what, unfortunately, what the markets is, and we saw this in the bids, is some of the stuff we're paying to get rid of.
Right.
Yeah. So
Styrofoam and everything else.
Yeah, it's 95% certain those are gonna be gone.
So for me, to look at this bid and sit there and say, $375,000, a little bit more, we're getting leaf pickup back, and we're getting weekly recycling, I'm saying kudos. I mean,
It's a win, yeah.
that to me was, like, I could jump out of my chair right now with excitement. When I read this, I was like, this is awesome.
I mean, if we
Excited
can
about
get all
trash.
this
Yeah,
and performance, that would
Yeah.
be
Yeah, and that's the other thing, we think we'll get good performance, too.
Performance is important.
If you make people pay for their trash barrels, they'd probably recycle more, but
Yeah.
that's down the road.
I guess just to add to performance, we did do reference checks, and right now E.L. Harvey is in Lexington and in Methuen. Those are some comparable communities in terms of size, and so we did have good references with where they currently are operating.
So I have another question too about the leaf pickup. So it's 5 days or 5 weeks?
No, it'll be 5 days, so it'll be well, I guess we have to set the exact schedule with E.L. Harvey and how they're going to run it, but we are committed to 5 days.
So they'll do the
whether
whole
they-
town in that one day?
Well, that's what it's one pass. So if it takes them 2 days, I guess it's up to them, but so there'll be a time where you'll know on what day to put your leaf pickup, or leaf in any other
But every
yard
house will
waste.
get 5 pickups a year.
Every house will get 5 pickups, and it will be a known date for you to bring everything to your curb.
That'll free up a lot of Facebook conversations.
So, and I guess also in that is that we currently do have the events between Community Tree we work with and at DPW. And those events currently cost about $40,000. So that's also, having an entire town now, 5 events, $75,000. We're getting a lot more service, I think, for not that much more. So we could potentially look at those 2 events. They're not really needed because now you're getting it picked up from your curb.
Well, not only that, but Jones Farms is for sale.
Yeah, he's right, he's no longer,
Right.
going to be
I mean,
doing that, right.
I would go to Jones too a lot, and when you figure the cost of that in, plus, so I think it's a win. I think it's good. It's forward-thinking with what's going on in the town, because once Jones is gone, where do you go?
Exactly.
So with that, I'll make a motion to approve E.L. Harvey and Sons 5-year contract as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, thank you.
Paul, did we get the bid documents for this?
Uh,
I've seen them.
I'll have to
Is
go
that
back and
one?
look. I know we've talked about it, but I don't know.
I just noticed it said they went out December 8th. I don't remember seeing it. Okay.
Just a few items under my report this evening. I have for you the new sewer flows for November. And again, we're in November was another dry month in terms of we had 75% of normal rainfall. You see once again that the flows for November were down. The first sheet gives you the aggregate flows, which is the 66.43. And then if you look at the second sheet, which gives you the comparable data in terms of year-to-date as well as, the 3 prior years, again, you can see that the 66.43 million gallons is, you're once again 20+% below what you had the last 3 years. And, and you can see that you generally tend to run higher as you go into the winter months. And now with December, it'd be interesting to see the data, which we'll see in another 10 days or so. But right now, we're tracking slightly above average rainfall, and then we're going to get a heavy rain on the end of this week. So December may be a more normal rainfall month, and we'll keep on top of this data. But it's very clear that the dry weather is having an impact on the sewer flow of the community. And just like we saw in July of 2022, it had a wet month, the wettest July in history, that went the other way. So again, we'll keep on top of this data. The other thing I want to announce, and Chief Ryan is still here, and I congratulate him because he's the one who did the work and submitted the grant, but the Chelmsford Fire Department was awarded a firefighter safety equipment, a grant award in the amount of just over $18,400, and that's for the purchase of water deployment crafts and sonar equipment for recovery operations. And the next thing I have in my report is the request to rename Nabnasa Drive. Again, I'm just keeping the board updated on this. I don't have a formal document from the Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Committee, but they're opposing this name change. So I have reached out to the Mr. Patnod, who made the request to change the name of the roadway and see if there's perhaps another way to we could recognize the families presence and contribution to the community. And the Diversity Equity Committee is trying to follow up on the idea that perhaps we should have a list of street names so that, that we could further recognize historic as well as ancestral presence in the community. So that's sort of where that stands at this point.
What was the background? It was, his family owned the land?
Yeah,
Why
exactly.
didn't this come up when he did the buy-sell on the land?
Yeah, I don't know. Or it would have been easier, it would have been a lot easier if he did it before town meeting voted to accept it, because then we could have had the discussion and debate, and ultimately town meeting could have decided. But now to go back, it is a hardship on the residents to change their vital
Yeah.
documents and everything else. Not to mention, now it would be perceived as a slight, as was sort of presented, as you're replacing a ancestral name with a, settler's name.
Do you know if the developer was there any conscious, deliberate
No,
intent to use
No, the developer was,
That's it.
the developer was asked the 3 names to submit, and this was Nabnasa was the 3rd on the list. The first one was, Kinloch, and then the second one was Lowell Road, which wasn't gonna fly, because it doesn't go to Lowell, and then the 3rd one was Nabnasa Drive, and that's the one that the 911 committee accepted. So,
Why not Kinloch, or was it just because there's already a Kinloch in town?
yeah, I don't
Same
know why.
buildings too, that's why. probably.
The same, yeah, I don't know what the significance of Kinloch was or why they did it, but I don't know if you recall that.
Kinloch apartment, so
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
you try to differentiate.
You'd be at 2 different ends of the
Two,
town if you
yeah,
screw that address up.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then on the economic development bill earmarks, the Massachusetts Department of Revenue has sent out the information. I'm working with Finance Director John Souza to secure the contracts for the funding, and we'll hope to have that completed by early in the new calendar year, and then those funds should be available several weeks thereafter. So I think once we get the contracts in place, we can then move forward with the expenditure and utilization of those funds. And then the last thing I have is the Northern Middlesex Council of Government call for contracts, which is the new phrasing for DLTA, or District Local Technical Assistance Grants. And much like we've seen, I'm not going to go through the 6 pages of the presentation, but bottom line is they're looking to provide technical assistance to cities and towns on basically a whole realm of issues, from sustainability to housing to transportation and community development and so forth. In speaking to Evan Belansky, I asked him for his initial thoughts, and what he was leaning towards would be to help with the implement the process and assist with the MBTA community zoning. So if you have any other thoughts, the deadline for this isn't until January 20th, so we have time. But I just wanted to let you know that call was issued on December 5th, and so again, I'll work with Evan towards the MBTA, community zoning assistance in terms of implementation of that. And if there's any other thoughts, I'm sure we can add that, because historically, there's usually have funds that they can do more than one project for a community.
Paul, I just had a question on the timing of that. So I saw in there that if you submit by January 20th, they'll make a decision by sometime in February.
Yep.
Right now, the earliest we're going to get the brief from NIMCOG on the Ledge Road, North Chelmsford truck traffic issues is after the January
Right.
20th date. So if there's like follow-on that we want them to do, is there still opportunity to
Yes,
present
yeah.
proposals?
Yeah, we've seen that. One is in her memo. She basically says that she wants projects submitted at any time the community has a need. And second of all, we've seen in the past that they've done a sort of second call for proposals. So yes, I think we'll have that opportunity. Thank you. That's my report this evening.
Okay, so now we have appointments.
The first one are select board appointments regarding the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. You have 2 vacancies on the committee, and you have 2 applicants, William Campbell and Elizabeth Picos.
Any comments, questions? If not, I'll take a motion.
Are both these for the same?
Yeah.
One's for till just the end of next year, and the other one's
Yeah.
until next summer, and then the other one's for 6 months and one's for 18 months.
We have to decide which is which.
Yeah. My only thought is Mr. Campbell applied previously,
Right.
so maybe we
I would
give him the
agree.
longer term,
Yep.
because he didn't make the cut the last time around.
Well, I think he withdrew.
He
his-
withdrew because we had too many applicants.
So I'll make a motion to appoint William Campbell to the Diversity, Equity, Inclusionary Committee to the unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2024.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
I'll make a motion to approve Elizabeth Picos to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusionary Committee to the unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
And then under town manager appointment, I'm seeking your confirmation to reappoint the Holiday Decorating Committee. They did a great job this year, and they're all willing to stay on. So John Fiora, Eric Merrill, Vivian Merrill, Sharon Smith, and Colleen Stansfield, and those terms expire with the calendar year, so it'll be 12/31/23.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2020 Holiday Decorating Committee reappointments as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
And then finally, to the CCA Advisory Committee, I have 2 applicants for unexpired terms that expire 6/30/2023. That's Maura Snow and Carissa Campbell.
So I'll make a motion to approve Morris Snow and Krista Campbell to the CCA Town Hall Advisory Committee, both 1-year terms expiring June 30th, 2023.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Thank you.
5-0. Next up, we have the Select Board regular meeting minutes of December 5th. Are there any amendments before we take a motion? If not, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from the, meeting minutes from the Select Board regular meeting for December 5th, 2022.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. And next up, we have the joint meeting with the Planning Board and Board of Health on December 7th. Are there any amendments before we take a motion? Okay, if not, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the joint meeting of the Select Board, Planning Board, and Board of Health from December 7th, 2022.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. I have an announcement on determination of releasability of executive session minutes. The minutes from December 5th, 2022, segments 3 and 4 have been released, and the minutes, the following minutes were deemed not releasable. November 7th, 2022, segments 1, 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3, and November 21st, 2022, segments 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next up, we have liaison reports. Mark?
I'm all set.
George?
Just wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and safe travel. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Ken?
I don't have any liaison reports, but again, as George said, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and safe travels, Happy Holidays.
Pat?
Yeah, I have a couple. Last week, we had a ribbon cutting for Hoyle Tanner Incorporated. They specialize in sustainable solutions for infrastructure projects, including airports, roads, bridges, and stormwater facilities, so glad to have them in town. I want to congratulate the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for donating $2,000 to the UNICEF Protect the Children of Ukraine Fund. This money was raised from donations for purchases of the Bridges for Peace that they sold during the Day of Peace on the Common in September. So congratulations to them, and good work for raising that money and making that donation. And lastly, Ellie Gilroy passed away last week. Anybody who was a town meeting member knows Ellie. She was always there to check us all in at town meeting. And if you ever voted, you probably saw her at the polling places. She was a poll worker for a very long time, so condolences to her family.
Thank you, Pat. I've got a couple from the Board of Health. The Health Department will not be holding their walk-in flu clinic on Tuesday, December 27th, but they will resume it Tuesday evening from 4 to 6 p.m. on Tuesday, January 3rd. And for anybody who's homebound and still needs a flu vaccine, you can call the Health Department office at 978-250-5241 and speak to Darcy to arrange for a home visit to be vaccinated. The Conservation Commission will be continuing their regulatory hearing for the Davis Company's River Neck Road development on January 10th, and they will also be having their regulatory hearing for the 270 Billerica Road development in one of their January meetings. The Planning Board public hearing for 270 Billerica Road is continued to January 11th, and the public hearing for 250 Apollo Drive is also continued to January 11th. There will be a new public hearing on January 11th for a subdivision at 264 Groton Road, and the River Neck Road public hearing is continued to January 25th. And Paul, I just had a couple of questions come in from residents. One is they were looking for minutes, and I guess some of the boards and committees are still lagging on posting minutes within the 30 days, so maybe we need another check on that, or just a reminder to folks. And then the other question that came in was, last year we had the objectives about communications and the websites, and I guess in one of those meetings, I think maybe Ken brought it up, there was a, we had talked about for ongoing development projects in town, is there a place where you can like easily go and find the documentation? And this person went to the community development page under current projects, and the only thing listed there is 276 Mill Road. So the question was, is there a way to like put all the ongoing projects there or somewhere else where it's easy to just go find the link and find the documents?
Okay, I'll follow up with Evan on that, yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe it just got overlooked putting the other projects up.
Okay.
That's all I have. It's 7:56. I'll take a motion.
Start packing up. Let me get my motion ready. I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session to review the executive meeting minutes of the December 5th, 2022, segments 1 and 2, not to return to open session.
Second.
Mark?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Ken? Pat?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Are we staying here?
We can just stay here.